and helping people from within the companies, inspire their employees and build those corporate cultures. Uh, he's going to help us with AI, right? As we try to use it as a job seeker and especially specifically ChatGPT to help us kind of, well, do the things he does with his clients, identify, creatively communicate. What's our differentiation, the point of differentiation. We're going to hear from Ron on how to save some time and trying to pull all those things together and make ourselves as attractive as possible. So, Ron, come on down. I'm going to let you share your screen and you can take it over from here.
Okay.
There he is.
I'll apologize for my messy screen to start with. I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm going to get into here. Okay. So Brian, is my screen coming through okay? Great. So just before I start, I wanted to piggyback off of some of the comments that you guys were sharing. Optimism. Recruiting is seasonal. This is the worst season of the year, the summer. So there's a cycle that repeats every year where companies get new budgets January 1 and recruiting goes crazy. It's the busiest quarter of the year. Q2 is a close second. Q3, the summer we're in right now, falls off a cliff. Because people are on vacations, they've spent their recruiting budgets, they're realizing they only have 6 months left to actually do their jobs or risk getting fired. So recruiting falls off the radar screen to a large degree. Q4 starts to pick up, especially as we get close to the holidays, with companies that are looking to get a jump start on identifying and securing mission critical talent that's ready to hit the ground running January 1. And then it all starts over again. So that curve I described stays the same every year. It just moves up and down in amplitude depending on what insanity is going on in the marketplace, how many wars there are, crazy elections, etc. But that curve's the same. Does it mean people can't land during in the summer? I've had clients land in the summer every year. There's just not as much opportunity. But one of the things, though, to realize that really hurts job seekers is solely focus on trying to identify and apply to job postings. There was a study done in 2019 that showed only 29% of openings went out to external search firms. The rest were filled through networking. LinkedIn published a study last year by analyzing all their data and analytics associated with their recruiting and job posting platform and found that 64% of openings are filled through referrals. You do the math on all that, that leaves less than 10% that are filled through job posting applicants. So it's what my clients refer to as the hidden job market that's really driven by networking. Networking is key. LinkedIn gives you the ability to send out 200 invitations to connect every week. Send them out without fail. That's 10,000 you could be sending in a year. Most of my clients enjoy around a 50% acceptance rate. So that's 5,000 targeted connections you could be adding to your network every year, and no one will ever take that away from you. Who do you target? Simple. Two types of people. Hiring authorities, the person that could be your boss, or their boss for that matter, and people that know them. So anyone in the sphere of influence of that hiring authority, and that does include recruiters. But don't myopically focus on recruiters from what I was sharing about data earlier. Think 80-20. 20% of your network focus, grow recruiters, add them to your network. 80% hiring authorities and people that know them. The other thing, I was talking with Brian at the beginning, he mentioned that there are a number of people that are attending today that maybe have no or little background in utilizing the tool that I'm going to describe today, ChatGPT specifically, or maybe even some that are really kind of hesitant or uncertain about it. Get educated. That's my message. So for what credibility I can establish, I'm a nut when it comes to being a continuous learner. Over the last 2 years, I've secured 14 certifications in artificial intelligence from Harvard, Oxford, Wharton, MIT, Kellogg, and others. This program that I'm showing right here, Coursera, is a learning platform. A lot of things are free. Some require a subscription. This course right here by Vanderbilt, I actually coached the chief information officer and AI czar at Vanderbilt University. She was telling me about this course that one of their professors teaches. That's Jules White that you see here. He's a professor at Vanderbilt, and he teaches this course. This course is for anyone. I've had my kids take it. I recommend it to all of my clients. There's about 5 other courses on here. It's a 6-week self-paced course. It's all video content. There's some simple exercises to demonstrate your learning in each of the video modules that you're going through. I went through it in 2.5 days. So it's self-paced. My son, when he was home for Christmas break, I said, do this. And he did it also in 5 days. It's simple, it's approachable. Anyone can do it, and you will benefit massively even if you do have experience with ChatGPT. This will create much more structure, and you'll be much more effective and utilize it. If you need, Brian, I can give you these links later if you want them. Okay, so let me get out of this. See, I've got a Zoom bar up here that's in my way. Okay, how do I get that out of there? Here we go. Nope, that doesn't want to move. Okay.
Thanks for posting that link in there, Sarah. Sarah put it in the chat, and we'll put that in the group too later for follow-up. Yeah.
So let me just kind of start for how all you all might be looking at jobs in the context you get a job spec. And a natural thing is that maybe you want to improve your LinkedIn profile relative to this content, or maybe you want to improve your resume relative to this job spec, or maybe you want to just prepare for an interaction, an introductory interview. Maybe you want to, for example, write a cover letter that's part of the application process if you're applying to something like this. So you have a job spec, and this is an actual job spec. I've changed some of the details so that you can't contact the company or anything like this, but this is an old job spec. This job doesn't even exist anymore. It's from several years back that one of my clients gave, and it was for a vice president of procurement at a very large company, CBRE, that's in the real estate space. And, it reads like any job spec: the title, location, what's the job purpose, what are some of the aspects of the job, and then what are the qualifications or requirements for a candidate, leadership essentials, key metrics that might be in there, and so on. So it's logical that before you talk to a recruiter, you might want to prepare, right, to have a good interaction. And what I want to do is show you how you can use ChatGPT specifically to do this. Now, I'm going to show you real fast a lot of different prompts and some examples of the responses that you get from AI. But what I want you to know that all of these prompts that I'm going to show you, Brian has a PDF of them, and after this session, you will have access to all of it. So you can try it yourself with your own content. So let me walk you through what I'm talking about here. So I'm going to the way you want to think about something like ChatGPT, for example, it's just a really freaking smart person. It literally has 150 IQ. To put that in context, Einstein had 160 IQ. It basically has a PhD in everything that you could think of, and it's been trained on knowledge that exists, and those trainings get updated. The most recent one was December 2023. So it's largely aware of books and content you learn in school and so on. And the way to really think about interacting with it is it's your assistant. It's an intern that's got a PhD in anything you could think of. So just ask it questions. You don't even have to be worried about how you phrase them or punctuation or spelling anything right. Just talk to it, and then it will respond. And one thing to remember too, if on a particular topic, if you're not sure what to ask it, just say, hey, I'm struggling with this. What are some questions I should ask you or could ask you? And then it will print out some examples. And then it'll start getting your thinking going of how would you interact with somebody that you're wanting some coaching or input or advice from. So let me get into ChatGPT now. Let me back up for a second. Sorry. So I also have a resume. This is an individual's resume that I know. I've changed their name and the companies that they work for and the data to protect the innocent, but I wanted to have an actual resume that mapped against an actual job spec. So these are two things that you would have on your end. So let me go into ChatGPT now. ChatGPT is easy to find. You can just go to chatgpt.com or openai.com. It's free to use. The paid membership gives you more capability for about $20 a month, which is one Starbucks latte a week gets you to that. The value is incredible. This is the best investment you'll ever make in your life, is subscribing to a platform like this, but you don't have to. There is the free version, and everything I'm going to show you, you can do in the free version. So let me make this window a little bit bigger and zoom in more. Hopefully you can see this a little bit better. So this starts, if I was to pull up just a fresh ChatGPT here. Okay, this starts like this, and this is called a thread. It's basically a conversation you're going to have with the AI. Now, GPT stands for generative, meaning it generates responses. Pre-trained, meaning it's been trained on information, so it has knowledge. Transformer, and that means it's going to look at your question it's going to transform through a transformation of its understanding of what it knows, it's going to generate a response to your query or your direction. Now, cut it some slack. Just like anyone else out there that you know, it's not perfect. It's going to do its best to generate a response. It may make a mistake. And what that reflects as is something called hallucinating, which is kind of a crazy term, but it's making up content to try and give you a response that may not be accurate. So you just need to fact check and things like that. But it's think of the mistakes that it might make as it's trying to put placeholder content in that is of the right framing and nature that you can replace with your own content to have something make sense. Now, over the last couple of years, those mistakes have decremented dramatically, but they can still happen. What I tell clients is, look, think of partnering with ChatGPT like this. First, 30% of any activity you want to engage it with, have it be a thought partner, ideate with you, help it get you to expand your perspective or knowledge of something. The next 50% of the activity is your gray matter. It's your unique subject matter expertise, knowledge, and experience that you put into the equation on your own. And then the last 20% is ask it to check your grammar. How can I make this better? I've got a physics degree. I can't spell to save my life, and I'll prove that today. And so I have it check grammar and, can this be written more clearly and things like that. So another analogy is when you think about football, there's something called the red zone, which is the last 20 yards before a touchdown. ChatGPT will get you all the way to the red zone, but then you take the handoff and you inject your gray matter to be able to take it into the end zone. That's the idea. So this first prompt, I would paste in here. And I'm just going to go back to the window where I've done all this so you don't have to wait for it to generate anything. And I say, I'm going to paste a job description and ask questions. Please act as an expert. This is called a persona prompt. You're wanting it to put on a certain hat. Act as an expert in all fields related to, act as an expert in all fields related to the implied leadership team that this role would interact with. Please list the interview questions a candidate for this role would expect to be asked by all parties that would logically interview this candidate, from a recruiter to a hiring authority to superiors in the organization to peers in the organization and organizational subordinates. And it says, sure. Please go ahead and paste in the job description. Now, you can actually drag and drop a document, which is what I did here, that spec that I showed you a minute ago. I just drag and dropped it. Or you can upload and browse to a document, or you can simply cut and paste that content into this window. That's fine to do also. But I gave it the document. And then it's running what I told it to do. It's exercising a task. And it says, based on the job spec for this role, here's questions a recruiter could ask you. Here's questions a hiring authority could ask you. Can you discuss your experience in managing large global procurement teams and the results you've achieved? Right? And so on. Questions that superiors, peers, subordinates. How do you approach coaching, mentoring, and training your team to achieve high performance? That's a question a subordinate might ask a new potential boss in an interview, as an example. Now, again, the generative side of this, you could do this 100 times and it will give you conceptually similar questions that logically relate to the job spec. But it's not going to be a direct duplicate every single time because it's generating these responses. That's something to keep in mind. And it's one of the reasons, depending on what you're doing, you could do this in a number of different similar platforms. Like if you're watching the Olympics, you've seen the competition to ChatGPT in commercials, and one's Google Gemini, and the other one's Microsoft Copilot. So for example, if I went to Gemini, okay, and here's the same prompt, here's the job spec, and it generates something that looks similar. It's giving me questions, right? Just like you might go to multiple people and ask the same question to see what they say, right? So similar concept here. In Microsoft Copilot, here you can't upload a document, but here's the prompt. I just pasted the entire content of the job spec in here, and then it ran it, and it's giving me examples of questions for those categories. So just remember, this isn't all unique to ChatGPT at all. I'm just demoing it in ChatGPT. So next question is, based on the list of questions you provide, what do you feel are the most important elements a candidate should emphasize in their answers to these questions in an interview? Use the STAR format. STAR, if you haven't heard for it, is an acronym that you want to keep in mind when you're answering questions that are designed to have you give an example. The acronym stands for situation, tell me what's going on. Give me some setup so I've got some context to understand the story you're going to tell me. What are the tasks that you needed to execute on to achieve a result I'm asking you to tell me a story about? What are the actions that you took to dispatch those tasks and achieve the result? That's R. So this is a very common interviewing format. If you interview at AWS, they absolutely expect candidates to respond this way. So use that framework to answer each question and how somebody should expand on their capabilities. So now it's getting into the response. Can you walk us through your experience in supply chain strategy, sourcing, category management, and procurement? And this is basically the instruction that you would take in as a candidate saying, describe a specific scenario in which you manage supply chain or procurement. Explain your role, responsibilities in that scenario. Detail the steps you took to handle the situation. Highlight the outcomes and any measurable achievements such as cost savings or improvement. So this is basically the coaching to you of how to think about an example that you want to use to answer this question. And then you can prepare for it, practice saying whatever your answer would be out loud. And then when you get an interview, you get this question, you crush it. And the idea is not that good interviewing is about, like any meeting, is about anticipating the kinds of questions that you're going to get. All of the prep work that you do here, and most people that interview don't prep at all. They just wing it and go in and they respond and become victims of interrogations. If you prepare for, any set of questions you come up with, even if you don't get any of those questions, you're going to be better prepared to answer the actual questions that you do because you've gotten yourself into the zone of thinking about that opportunity and also how you fit to it. Now, this next prompt, so I scroll through all of those for the different questions. Okay. I'm going to paste a resume and then ask you questions after I provide it. Please format your responses to all of my questions in Markdown. So that's just me saying, hey, this is how I want to see the response. And these are things like bullets, headers, enumerated lists, and so on, and some, outlining format and structure, if you will, so it's easier to follow. You don't have to do that. Sometimes it just does it automatically, but I'm just being explicit saying I want my output looking like that. It tells me to go ahead and ask my questions about the resume. And I say, great. Based on your analysis of the resume I provided, please tell me how the candidate's resume aligns with the job spec. With each of the specific interview questions you've identified and the important elements a candidate should emphasize and so on to differentiate themselves. So now it's getting into this and it's saying, here's the alignment that it sees relative to the criteria, global scope and leadership. So it's identifying all of these aspects relative to, specific aspects associated with who this person's worked for and the content and information that's in the resume. Now, it can't read between the lines. It's only going off of the content that you've given it. And this is something that's really important to think about as we're going through this exercise, because part of what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask it questions of, hey, where is the candidate at risk of being perceived as weak? And that's largely based on ignorance. So it doesn't mean that the candidate isn't able to do something. There's just nothing in the resume that speaks to that. So that's where you might want to think about, are you getting questions relative to what you think would be important criteria in an interview? Or do you need to step in and say, hey, would this experience be important to you? Or I think it might, I can, expand more on it. And then that interviewer who just assumed you didn't have it would say, yeah, that'd be great to hear, as an example. Or also be prepared that you might get questions that focus on what's not in your resume. And that's logical because that's really what interviewing is all about, trying to close gaps relative to the information that someone doesn't have. So again, these are just different categories. Now it's telling you what you want to do when you're giving responses to these questions. Emphasize this specific experience that it knows you have, as an example. So this is all coaching on how to build your stories based on what it knows in your resume. Go now to the next prompt. Acting as a candidate, again, persona prompt. Now you're telling the AI to act as the candidate. Act as the candidate and using the content from the resume to frame your answers. How should this candidate answer these questions? That's basically what all these words say in the prompt, but that's the net of it. And so it says, great, can you walk us through your experience in supply chain, strategic sourcing, category management, and procurement? So using the STAR format and the content from the individual's resume and probably doing some natural extrapolation or interpolation or fabrication, how would the AI coach you to respond based on what it knows? And this is where it might, quote, hallucinate, because it's trying to generate an answer to the question using what you've given it And where it's got gaps, it closes those gaps with those hallucinations, if you will. So this is where you're fact checking and simply look at the framework and just replace content that's not actually accurate or fabricated. That's the idea. So all of these, it's giving you a framing of based on that resume content, here's how you should answer the question. Now, this is in brief. You run these exact same prompts again on the same resume and the same job spec. Even the formatting of these answers might change, and the level of detail it's giving you might change, either more detail or less detail. So I do that sometimes. If I, for example, I got something that was kind of abbreviated, I will follow up and say, can you give me a little bit more detail in your answers? And it will regenerate them again with more detail. Or you can go the other way too. Hey, these were excessive. Can you make these much more concise and cut these down, distilling them down to about 25% of the length? Let me go to...
Hey, Ron, we have one question. Someone asked if you could use both your resume and your LinkedIn profile as a source.
Absolutely. You can conceptually change these prompts and have them be specific now to asking about your LinkedIn profile as opposed to your resume and what might come from that. And I'm actually going to get to a little bit of that alludes to how can you use AI to help you improve your LinkedIn profile as well as your resume. That's towards the end of what I'm going to show you here.
Okay. So would you copy in the link to your profile, or would you just copy in all the text?
You could copy a link to a profile. In fact, let me go up here. Is it this one? No, that's the one I'm in right now. Okay, is it this one? I did this with a client. Oh, here it is. Sorry. So I had a client session this morning. Come on, there we go. Okay. And he was interviewing, he's going to be interviewing with someone, and I gave the AI that individual's LinkedIn profile and then asked questions based on that interview. So yeah, it can read a LinkedIn profile. But before it was able to do that, what you could do is just download the PDF of your LinkedIn profile, which is a mouse click in your LinkedIn profile, and then cut and paste the content just raw into it. And again, ask it for help. I'll get into more specifically how to do that later. So the next prompt here is acting as a critic and as an expert in all fields related to everyone that's interviewing this. Please provide an ordered list identifying the areas and or criteria associated with the job spec where the candidate's at potentially at risk of being perceived as weak. Okay, so you have to force it to give you negative feedback by using a critic prompt. Any prompt, it's always going to give you, try and fulfill your wishes, if you will. And you have to force it to act as a critic through this persona prompt that I'm describing to get it to give you feedback or negative feedback. How could this go wrong versus just all the reasons why this is a great idea? So that's what I'm doing here is I'm forcing it to give me, feedback, if you will. So here's an example. ESG and sustainability initiatives. Risk. The resume provides limited specific examples of strategy and achievements related to ESG goals. Responsible sourcing, supplier diversity, and so on. Critique. While there are mentions of responsible sourcing and sustainability, the lack of detail, quantifiable results in this area might be seen as a gap, especially given the growing importance of ESG. And might go back to the resume and even look, is the term ESG even used in the resume versus speaking about concepts that relate to it? Okay, same thing here. Specific experience in facilities management procurement. Risk. Candidate experience is heavily weighted towards technology and software procurement with less emphasis on real estate and facilities management procurement. Now, that doesn't mean the person doesn't have it. It's just not indicated in the resume. So the reader or digester of that resume would be ignorant of that. Critique. Job spec highlights the need to manage procurement across vast facilities and so on. Candidate's experience appears to be limited, which might raise concerns about their ability to manage these effectively. And then it goes through all of these different areas where you could be at risk of being perceived as weak. What can the candidate do? Next prompt. What can the candidate do to mitigate the perception of weakness or risk of failure in these areas? Please frame your response as I describe, and here it is. So recommendation relative to that first one that I read, prepare detailed examples of any ESG related stuff, duh, right? And then the next one, relative to experience with facilities management, highlight any of this related experience, right? Sometimes it will come back and say, if you don't know this stuff, quickly learn. So you can demonstrate this if you get questions on it by taking a course at Coursera or, whatever it is we're talking about, or go get an MBA because you're not qualified for this role, as an example. Thank you for that question. Please, if there's any coming in, and people do ask them, Please ask questions. Um,
Ron, the curious researchers asked, is there a reason why critic is in all caps in your prompt?
Sure. So the reason why is because it's how the AI responds to the language. And one of the things that it's hard to find this has been through a lot of learning that I've gone through, and actually some reverse engineering of, I'm going to get weird technically here, system prompts of how the AI is supposed to respond, is that if you want to emphasize something, put it in all caps. Like rule, never do this. Capitalize rule and capitalize never as an example. So here I want to make absolutely certain that I emphasize the word critic. So that's why I put it in all caps. Okay.
Thank you.
So acting as a critic and as an expert in all fields, maybe I would highlight all in all caps. In all fields related to the implied leadership team, this role would report into, please provide a list of all the skills a candidate should emphasize that would differentiate the candidate over other candidates competing for this role. So the concept here is, hey, you may have unique skills that go above and beyond necessarily the bar to qualify for this position that would differentiate you from those that you're competing with. So emphasize significant global procurement leadership experience. And this is pulling stuff out specifically from a resume as an example, and this particular result, and these skills that this individual has. Sorry, this keeps getting in the way. Proven track record of delivering cost savings. And again, it pulls an example of doing that, meaning emphasize this. Use this as an example in your response to questions as an example, and so on. Next one. Now, this is just kind of like, what else you got question is I'm asking here. So to avoid redundant overlap with your previous responses and acting as a critic, relative to this, what do you feel are the most important additional specific elements a candidate should emphasize when interviewing with respect to high value experience and skills? And so here it again identifies different attributes that this candidate should emphasize, and then it pulls out why is it important, what is the candidate's experience that it's pulled out of the resume, and what's the skill associated with it that should be emphasized. So all of this analysis it's doing, it's like, hey, you're a freaking rock star candidate for this based on these things. Make sure you emphasize them. Acting, no, okay, so.
Ron, we have one more question about some of the wording you had in the prompt. But the question was, why did you add implied before the leadership team in all the prompts earlier?
Okay, so, okay. To avoid redundant overlap with your previous response, act as a critic and an expert in all fields related to the implied leadership team, meaning this job spec implies that it's somewhere in the hierarchy of the company. And what would be the natural people that would be over this individual that is the leadership team that this individual would logically interact with in the course of executing their responsibilities? So if you're lower in the corporation, and your boss is a manager, then maybe, it's a director. And so that director would be a logical person that would interview you in that capacity, as an example. Or if you're a VP at a company, maybe the CEO, your skip level, as opposed to an SVP that you report to, or an EVP that you report to, or a C-level executive that you report to, and then their boss is the CEO, it's that person might logically interview you. So it's thinking about, who are the people that are implied in a corporate hierarchy that would be involved in interviewing this candidate relative to superiors or leaders, the hiring authority, boss, peers in the organization that they work with across the organization, and then their subordinates that are supporting them. That's the concept behind this question.
So do you feel it gives you a better answer by saying implied leadership team versus if you left it out, if you just said leadership team?
Well, okay, maybe I'm verbose. You can try it. What the spec is implying. That's why I use the word deliberately. It's not that you might get the same thing.
Okay.
For that matter, right? So the prompts aren't always perfect. In fact, one thing you could do, you could take a prompt that you've come up with and you could give it to ChatGPT and say, this is a prompt that I'm trying to create to achieve this outcome. Can you help me rewrite this so it's a better prompt? Right? You can do all of that. So let me go back to where I think I was.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. So ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System Software. It's that evil software that gets between you and the recruiter, that is programmed by the recruiter saying, here are all the keywords that I want you to look for in someone's resume and any other attributes. And then it scans resumes. This is why a job application process, meaning job boards, sucks, because there's no way that a recruiter can look at 1,000 or 10,000 resumes. So an applicant tracking system does that first, calls out the subset that looks like it might resonate with the job spec. And now a human being is triaging those for fit. A subset of those are pulled out, and then they are who get reached out to by the recruiter. Everybody else is screwed and doesn't hear anything but crickets in most cases. Okay, that's what an ATS system here. So this prompt is, please analyze the job spec, being as you are an expert in how ATS systems work, and make recommendations on the keywords or keywording that needs to be included in a candidate's resume that's not in the candidate's resume, meaning I don't need you to comment on stuff that's there, to optimize its resonance with the job spec and how an ATS would identify that resonance. Okay, so again, this is about what's not in your resume. Okay, so procurement IT systems, right? The reasoning typically is some flavor of the job spec talks about this, so you should have this in your resume. And then the recommendation is what you should do and why. Again, how this responds, it's going to be some variation every time. You won't duplicate the same format or reasoning. And sometimes it actually will give you examples, not just give you direction of, hey, do something that's like this. But this goes through ESG and sustainability, supplier diversity. So these are all keywords and key phrases that should be in the candidate's resume. So for example, one of my clients, when I was coaching him, he realized, I have delivered 4 corporate transformations at 4 different companies throughout my career. It's a key theme of my success, and nowhere in my resume do I use the word transformation. So it's that kind of concept. Okay, so some of these are straightforward: cost savings and operational efficiency, and so on. So, and then it gives you this summary of this keyword bank. Okay, and it says by incorporating these keywords and detailing the relevance and the experiences, you will optimize your resume for ATS systems and ensure better alignment. And now what I'm doing is I say, based on your answer to this question, combine your knowledge of this individual's resume. Please write a 2,600 character LinkedIn profile about section that actively works all of the identified ATS summary of key areas to address the previous response into this about section to optimize resonance with ATS systems and similar AI capability. In November in LinkedIn, they announced what I knew was coming and why I've been coaching my clients on how to utilize this tool to weaponize against that is AI is being implemented in similar ways as ATS tracking, and LinkedIn announced that they've integrated AI into their recruiting platform. And the concept is a recruiter does a search to try and identify a candidate, and they'll put keywords in to try and refine the result response they get. And so let's say they're looking for a vice president of supply chain like this, plus some other things like change management and some of those other keywords, right? And then they get a result, a search result. And maybe there's 1,326 profiles in that result. There's no way a recruiter can read all of those. AI does. And then again, algorithmically looks for that resonance, calls out a subset that looks like they're the best candidates based on how AI analyzed all of that. And then the recruiter starts having a manageable amount of candidates they can then triage. So it's a mirror image, but driven by AI in LinkedIn. I said, make certain to not, emphasizing the word with caps, simply use list or use these keywords or key phrases as paragraph titles or headers. This is something that I see, unfortunately, a lot of people do mistakenly, where they put a table of words and will title it key skills, right? And they'll list all of these different skills. Well, the problem with that, doing it that way, it's all out of context. Anybody can drop anything they want into a table. It doesn't mean that it means anything. At the end of the day, it's just keyword stuffing. People pick up on it and throw your resume in the garbage. What you want to do is take all of these keywords and actively work them into the phrasing and content of your resume so they come to life and they have context around them, and you'll see examples of this, okay? So this is a LinkedIn About section that it's written now. Now, target 2,600 characters, it will never hit that because it doesn't count characters, but it gives it a concept around how much text you're looking for. So you may need to reduce this, or you can ask it to embellish it more if you need it to be longer, as an example, and it will expand or contract that volume of output accordingly. But here you go. And I asked it to put in bold so I can see that it did this, each one of these phrases, working it into the narrative of the about section that it wrote. And so I can go through the list and I can check them all off, like ESG goals. Okay, great. It used that one, and so on. Unified digital platform, global procurement, and so on. Stakeholder engagement. Now, when you look at something like this, some of this may be embellishment or extrapolation or fabrication, i.e. hallucination, but it's trying to frame a response that you can now use as an example, fact check it, and then see that that content really isn't yours or accurate, but you have an idea of how to frame that so you can use your own intellect about your and understanding of your career to frame a similar sentence as an example. Okay. And so now I get into, please rewrite the resume content for Steven Johnson for the role content I provide here. I simply wanted to show you that you can paste content in here also. Please actively work in all the identified ATS summary areas and some additional instructions of do, don't relative to, don't just stack words, but write them in and all of that and use bold. And so what I did was I took, so this is resume. No, we don't need that anymore. So I can get that out of there. Don't save. Did I close the resume? No, I'm looking at it right here. Okay, great. So what I did was I simply cut and paste all of the content associated with this role versus the whole resume. It's better to do chunks when you're doing writing. Don't ever try and say, hey, rewrite my entire resume. It will fail on that. Zero in on a specific role or even a certain part of a role, like the responsibility paragraph or the results bullets as an example, and have it work on that. And then build all of those components together, string them together to have or create the resume that you want. So here I pasted in that content. And then here's the response. So Steven Johnson, blah, 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 header. Here's that role. And then here's the content that it's writing. You see all the bold where it's using the keywords. I'm not saying I like this resume, so I haven't given it any instruction on, the format or framing or flow of a resume. It's more just repeating the structure of that resume, but it's working and rewriting all that content here, and it bold-faced all these so I could see where these are being used. Again, could hallucinate, fabricate content, right? But it's framing it in a correct way so you can replace it with the right kind of content. And then I said, please rewrite the career summary, because the career summary was really short in that individual's resume. And I gave it similar instruction and it wrote the career summary for that individual. This is the paste that I gave it. And so it wrote that career summary. Again, loading in contextually relevant ways, the keyword phrases. Now, I would never put this together and put it like that. So that's why I say, please distill this content by 50% because it's too much. Okay, and it does. Okay. And then I say, please write it as a single narrative paragraph and don't use the pronoun I, so you don't sound like a narcissist. I've got this background. I've done this. I've done this. I. You're obviously not a team player. That kind of a thing. It's not someone else's resume. So the prompt is actually, use an implied subject, I, and then, use action verbs. And then this right here is really important because sometimes you want to do this. You actually want to give it an example. Either an example of a good thing to do or a bad thing to do or both for contrast. In other words, don't do this. I led a project that produced great results. Do this. Led a project that produced great results. Now it understands more specifically through that example of what I'm asking for. And this is a technique in prompting called zero shot, meaning no examples, one shot, meaning one example, or multi-shot, meaning more than one example. Why they call it shot, I don't know, but just substitute example for the word shot and it makes sense. So here's the career summary. And it's a narrative paragraph, and it's shorter, and it's denser, okay? So that's what I wanted to show you here, but what I also wanted to just make you realize is that you're not wedded to ChatGPT. You could do this in Gemini. There's a free version of that using the exact same prompts, and Gemini gives the ability to upload documents, where Copilot, you can use the same prompts, but you can't upload documents. It doesn't let you do that. So you simply just cut and paste content like I did in this example here. And there's also another one from a company called Anthropic. And the model is, or the chatbot, these are all called chatbots, is Claude. There's a free version of that also that you can use and a paid version. All the paid versions cost $20 a month on all these different platforms. And as an example, oops. As an example, I've got subscriptions to Claude, Gemini, Google AI Studio comes with Gemini. Perplexity.ai is something that's free. There's a paid version also. This is basically AI-powered search. Search like Google search or Yahoo search as an example. So if you want to do a search, try doing the exact same search in Perplexity. And instead of doing it in Google, what Google does is it returns a number of pages as your result with links to content that's relevant to your search. And then you got to go click on all those links, read them, discover what, is worth reading, and, whatever you're going to do with that knowledge afterwards. Where what Perplexity.ai does is it does all of what I just described, but the AI engine reads all of those links, pulls out typically the most 5 to 20 relevant links, summarizes all of that content, and adds citations so that you can click on them and go to the original source content for those links. It's fantastic for doing research. And any of this that you want to learn, just go to YouTube and put in a prompt like, what's Perplexity.ai, and then start watching YouTube videos. For the first year, 2 years ago, I watched literally over 1,000 hours of YouTube videos trying to learn how to do a lot of the things that I'm showing you here, in addition to taking all these ridiculous AI certification courses that I went through. Okay, ask me questions. Did I put you all to sleep? And I know
Go ahead and unmute yourself if you got questions, guys. It's all right to ask directly. I know looks like we got 52 folks here on the line.
And again, all the prompts that I showed you,
we're going to share.
You guys will have access to everything that I showed you as far as the prompts. I'm not giving you the results because it actually has information that came from clients, even though I sanitized it. But you can apply all of these prompts in the exact same way. And the only thing you need is a job spec and a resume to do all of what I showed you.
We get a lot of claps online. Thanks for bringing this to us, Ron. I know we got this recording. We're going to trim it down, and we'll post this online this week. I see a lot of happiness online, and yeah, that prompt engineering thing, guys. You're starting to see that in all kinds of tools, not just in the AI ones that we went through, that Ron went through today. So learning how to ask those questions in a different way is becoming very helpful, and it's kind of our special skill set as researchers, right? It doesn't look like there's any questions here. I will go. I'll say thank you. Go ahead.
Hi. I was wondering, I have played around with ChatGPT quite a bit when it comes to applying to jobs and tailoring resume and even cover letter. I'm wondering if you have heard of anybody having success with it as a way to actually find jobs that you might be a good fit for, rather than doing that legwork yourself and then using it to apply, but asking it to be like, giving it your LinkedIn profile or your resume or what have you, and having it search for you for prospective roles.
So the problem with that ask is that it's really general. And what you have to do is you're going to get better responses the more specific and directive your requests are. The more general they are, the more your responses are going to mirror that generality. So you can always just try doing it. But in terms of, have I ever had clients, or do I coach clients to do what you're describing? I don't, because of the problem that I just described. Now, let me retract part of what I said. Go into Perplexity.ai, because that's a mechanism. Some of these models, they do have access to the internet, but that's not the same thing as an AI-powered search engine like Perplexity. So you oftentimes get better results. You'll get different results for sure if you go into Perplexity, which is also an AI, and then give it your query. There is capability to upload content or paste it in, for that matter, and then ask. But the one thing that, again, that your query is resulting in is its postings. And the problem with postings, even that you find online through any sort of searching that you're done, is, are they still live? And there's no way necessarily to be able to search on that aspect. And if any of them are behind firewalls, like you have to log into something, even though it's free, right, to use whatever service we might be talking about, that you still have to log in, and that content's behind a firewall that only after being logged in will it see, right? But you can try. You're just, again, focusing on job postings. And I'm not saying you can't land a job with a job posting, but my analogy is it's like winning the lottery, right? You can't win the lottery if you don't play the lottery, but you don't take all your financial resources and dump it into lottery tickets because of the low probability of winning the lottery. It's the same thing relative to don't put all of your bandwidth into surfing job postings. Have a more balanced approach that highly emphasizes networking to be able to gain exposure through your networking to opportunity that you'd rock at. I don't know if you like my answer or not, but I'm just trying to coach you on what works versus what most people are frustrated with, which is the whole, shit show, forgive my language, that job posting reality is.
Yeah, we're all looking for ways to make it easier to find the right match, right? And so this is, certainly helpful. And also AI can be a time drain the more you get into it. So being able to focus on the things that you think you're going to have the most success with really helps.
Learning how to use it will help you in terms of the time drain. Get better at a skill. It's a skill. It's an approachable skill that anyone, it doesn't require any technical background at all. It's just learning how to have a conversation with something that's really smart in a directive, contextually relevant, specific way. I see a hand up.
Yeah, Nicole?
Yeah, thank you. I was just curious. I mean, I think this is all super helpful, and the prompt engineering is it's just exploding. So seeing this in this application is so helpful for job seekers. That aside, it also makes me think that we've just now jumped on this wheel that like we're now trying to game a system that's also created a game. So now we're all part of this big game of how to basically work around what's been now established. Like, as you said, LinkedIn is now searching these certain keywords and stuff. You don't have that. So it's like everybody's trying to sort of one up to get to a point where you can get to a job and a connection and all of that. And so I guess I'm just curious, like, where do you see some of this going? Somebody even put in the chat, we're now hearing, and understandably, like that these ATS systems, like we're just seeing all these generic things come in. And somebody's clearly used ChatGPT. They probably haven't used their gray matter to actually fine tune it or whatever that looks like. And then they're just, sort of ignoring them. So now people are like, please, so, in your summary, you need to stand out as a candidate I literally sometimes feel like I just want to put the craziest thing in my summary to get somebody's attention because it seems, I'm not sure how else we're going to get through all this. So anyway, I'm just sort of curious where you think this is all heading.
Sure. So I hear everything that you're saying. The thing to realize is that before AI, all this stuff was happening with ATS systems. ATS systems have been around for decades. So that's not anything new. All AI does is make that side of the equation, the recruiter side of the equation, more efficient, is all, because it can process much more information much faster than necessarily just a software application can do. But now using it or weaponizing it on the candidate side in your benefit, yeah, you're going to have people that are just, stuffing their resumes, trying to be all things to all people, or just, show that they walk on water. But what happens though is you still have to be able to prove it, demonstrate it in an interview. And so what I'm trying to show you is how to prepare yourself to be able to do that. Now, as far as the resonance is concerned, that's just logical. I mean, forget ATS systems, forget AI, back before any of that, and you just had paper resumes, not even an internet. Somebody's got a job opening, they're looking at a resume, are they seeing resonance, right? And so you're trying, in an ideal world, a resume is a mirror image to a job spec, in that it reflects all of the hiring criteria and experience requirements that's in the job spec. It's one-to-one, right? Match made in heaven, that kind of concept. And so how I've coached candidates for years on resume articulation is you want to make sure that you're reflecting the hiring criteria. In an ideal world, not practical, but in an ideal world, you would have a unique resume for every job that you are going after, right? But that's not practical. So in the context of what you're implying, one of the things you can do that AI can help is if you call in a bunch of job specs that you're a good fit for, you can have AI analyze those for the common keyword content, and then make sure that at least that common keyword content is present in your resume. And if you want to do any fine tuning or not, it's up to you, but you've made a better mirroring of the ecosystem of jobs you're going after. I don't know if I spoke to your question or not. I don't think it's going to turn into this hamster wheel kind of thing, where you're trying to one up it's like Vegas, right? Card counting, all these kind of things. They're always trying to beat the system, right? And that will always be present, but especially as AI gets more sophisticated, that will become harder and harder to do. Embrace AI, learn it, make it a skill. One of the things that, I forget whether I said this earlier or not, but one of the things I coach clients on is that your job is not going to be replaced by AI anytime soon. Your job is going to be replaced by somebody that knows how to do your job and understands how to utilize AI to do their job even better than you. So we're at a point where anyone that has any base understanding of AI is absolutely ahead of the game compared to anyone they're competing against that lacks that understanding.
Ron, we have a few more questions that came in. So one was asking about, would you recommend all these steps to prep for all interviews? Or if you had to pare it back, what would be like the couple key things that you would recommend?
So, okay, if you have infinite bandwidth, I would absolutely recommend this. I mean, when I'm coaching clients on interviewing, the one that I had this morning, he's interviewing for a managing director role at PricewaterhouseCoopers consulting firm, and he's interviewing with senior partners. And he scheduled a coaching session with me every day for a week. And what did we do? I put him in a batting cage and I threw complex interview questions at him and help him refine his responses. You can do that in AI, actually, in that you can just turn on dictate in Word and speak your answer out loud, and it will transcribe your response. You can cut and paste that into ChatGPT and say, hey, here's an interview question. Here's my response to it. Here's my resume, my LinkedIn profile, anything else you want to give it in brief, and say, how can I improve my response to this? And it will probably come back and say, well, you you didn't really get into enough description on the situation and your actions were kind of meh or limited. You want to expand on your actions, and then it will generate a script of a better answer. Learn that script. So at the end of the day, what you have to realize is that most people that you're competing with for opportunity do not practice or put any time into preparing for interview. No one does this. The more you put in, the better prepared you will be to rock that interview. So what would you pare back? You could pare back the ATS stuff as an example, but the first part of it, is really just a logical reverse engineering of the spec. Hey, based on the spec, what questions should I prepare for? Candidate should have X years of experience. Tell me about how many years of experience you have. That's a reverse engineering of the spec to come up with those initial interview questions. But you can ask for more nuanced questions as an example. The areas of perceived weakness, that's important because again, that's coming from largely being ignorant of what's behind your resume. You look at your resume, you can't help but look at it with all the knowledge of the backstory of your career and go, well, as any fool can see, I'm awesome. But when anyone else looks at that resume, they lack the backstory and their perception may be different. And that's where the questions come from in an interview, is closing those gaps of what they need versus what they see and might be exposed to.
Thanks. Another question, and this may be a whole different presentation, but he said, this is great, but I'm rarely getting to the interview. How can we use these tools to be better networkers?
Sure. So your LinkedIn connection invite. When you send an invite, you have two options: send without a note and send with a note. There's long-standing metrics on LinkedIn that show that you are more likely to have your invite accepted if you include a note. In other words, make a freaking effort, right? When you send something. And so what you can do is you can utilize ChatGPT to help you write a compelling LinkedIn introduction request that includes something about your common connections, that includes something about the nature or makeup of your network. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to be reaching out with a need. Don't reach out with a job seeker need or agenda. This gets into something I coach executives on before LinkedIn even hit the scene, that most people don't understand what networking is. They engage in an activity I call need working, meaning you have a need and you're working it. I need a job. I'm looking for a job. Can you help me? You're asking for help. And that is the same psychological response as somebody holding up a cardboard sign at a freeway on-ramp. People look away for two reasons. Either they can't help you or they don't want to help you. So don't reach out with a need. Reach out. Networking is about giving before getting. It's what value can you offer someone? Hey, want to connect, compare notes, and see where our interests align. That kind of concept. So it starts with that regarding connections. And target hiring authorities and people that know them, because those are the ones that have knowledge of all the open jobs, whether they're posted on LinkedIn or not. 1 in 6 of my clients have jobs created for them. But it comes through the networking they could do. It's like, wow, can you do that? We actually need somebody that can do that. Are you also able at doing this? Yeah, I am. Okay, well, let's build a job around you to hire you and capture your talents as a result. How you can also do it is now you connect with someone. And now this isn't just about collecting baseball cards. You want to interact with people. Like I'm saying, well, okay, now you can write an introductory message that is networking based, not needs based, that says, hey, thanks for connecting with me. As time permits, when I have a virtual cup of coffee, here's a link to my online calendar. If you don't have one of those, get one. Calendly is free, though there are paid subscriptions also. Now somebody can see when you're available and they don't have to interact with you to do it. Here's some content about my background for context. You're not selling them, you're educating them. Let me know if you'd like to have a virtual cup of coffee as your bandwidth or needs arise. I look forward to investing in our networking relationship. Love and kisses, and then hit send and have LinkedIn help you write that message. So there's nothing you can do to get AI to directly interact with your LinkedIn account that will cause you to lose your LinkedIn membership in a nanosecond because you're violating user agreement if you're doing anything like that. But it's helpful in analyzing. You can dump a LinkedIn profile from somebody that you're trying to connect with and say, hey, here's what they do, here's what I do. What are some possible outreach approaches that I could use to try and draw them into a conversation?
Great. And the last question that came up was, someone said that they find that ChatGPT often words things more formally and doesn't sound like their voice. And they've tried to give that feedback, but it doesn't really fix it. So any suggestions for good prompts around tone and voice?
Well, one, you can train an AI to speak in your voice. You have to give it a bunch of examples of how you write and speak and tell it to learn it for the purpose of being able to emulate your writing style. And then give it a piece, something, say, can you rewrite this in my voice? As an example. So you have to be very deliberate in how you're doing that and very prescriptive with your prompting so that it understands what you're asking it to do. But you can also say, hey, this is kind of antiseptic and formal. Can you write this in a more conversational manner? Even just saying that would be good. And sometimes if you say that, and if it's still a little bit too intellectually, again, physics degree, I'm an idiot when it comes to things sometimes, I just invented a word, is what you could do is you could use the prompt, introduce more human perplexity into your writing. Make it sound more human, more conversational. It's using terms like that, so you're giving it instructions relative to the style you're trying to get it to write in. I mean, you could tell it, hey, can you rewrite this paragraph as if you were Mark Twain? And it'll do it. Or Shakespeare, and it will do it because it knows those writing styles. It doesn't know yours, so you have to teach it that. But you can absolutely do what you're asking.
Great. Thank you. I think that does it for questions. Thanks again, Ron, for all that information.
Everyone, for the opportunity and privilege to be able to share some of my learning with you. I hope you got value out of it. Rewatch the video, try these things yourself. Experiment, be curious, ask it questions. Can you do this? How would I do this? Tell it, hey, what are 10 questions I should be asking you? As an example. Have fun with it. Thank you again, everyone.